Mike Wolfe is best known as the creator and star of American Pickers. But beyond the television cameras, he's a lifelong motorcycle enthusiast, storyteller, and preservationist with a deep appreciation for the people and places that make America unique. For decades, Mike has traveled the backroads of the country, uncovering forgotten treasures, preserving history, and sharing the stories hidden behind old motorcycles, rusty signs, and dusty barns. But at its core, his work has never really been about the objects themselves. It's about the people. In this episode, we talk about the thrill of the hunt, the value of preserving the past, the lessons found in overlooked places, and the role motorcycles have played throughout his life. This is Mike Wolfe. Now let's dive in. Welcome to Ride Beyond, where we go beyond the ride and into what matters. In this podcast, you'll find meaningful conversations with people who live with passion, chase freedom, and remind us what it means to live fully. The motorcycle is our connection, but the stories are what take us beyond.
And then when Indian launched their brand in, I think it was like 2014, they asked me to be a part of that. And so I went up to Polaris in Minnesota, and I was so excited because, I've been around Indians for a very long time and own a lot of them, and was interested to see what they were doing with it, because everybody that had owned it before them were just like putting S&S motors in it, and making it look the same, where they were actually creating their own motor and building the bike from the ground up. So when I went up there, it was surreal, man. They had like a bike made out of clay, like a whole bike, like a huge bike made out of clay. And the guys were in there like carving on it and shit. And we were talking, and, we obviously agreed on a lot of different things. And then Sturgis that next year, I was there representing Indian, and all we had to launch was the engine. Do you remember that? All we had was an engine.
I don't really remember that.
Oh my God.
But I remember there was a lot of buzz around Indian when they first came out.
Oh yeah. Everybody was excited, because it was a company that owned it, that had, juice behind it. I think Polaris at that time was like a $5 billion a year company. So I remember we go there with the engine, we're on stage at what's the big event that, where they have all the concerts and stuff. I know.
I don't know, dude.
We were on stage, and I'm revving the engine. Everybody's like, yeah, man, freaking, yeah, Indian's back. We actually had the heartbeat of it, the engine. And then the next year we went,
You're talking about Sturgis? Or
yes, in Sturgis.
Yeah,
yes.
Sturgis.
And, sorry, my mind works in a very weird way, but the next year we had the Chief. So we actually had a bike, and they were like, people test ride them and stuff. And we had, a lot of the higher ups in India were there, doing all these rides and stuff. And then the following year, we did the Scout on stage. And somebody told me, I think I was there. Wasn't there do you remember, that story with Roland, where he like fell off the stage for the Scout?
Dude, I saw that.
You saw it happen?
Yeah,
I didn't see it. I didn't see that. But I wasn't there at that shining moment, but he's a crazy son of a bitch, man.
He's crazy.
And I love the guy so much. Roland is like, he's one of those dudes that he's just always in the same mood. You know what I mean? You see him and you pick up a conversation with him like you haven't seen him in,
he's a very, very genuine, cool dude.
Oh, he's badass. But I'd never seen him ride before. So I went out.
He rips, dude.
Oh, I went out. Yeah. I went out riding with him. He was on a Scout. And I was on a Scout, and there's just no way I mean, when we got back, dude, the pegs and the footboards were all ground off the bike,
throwing sparks.
Oh God. I mean, it was crazy. And I was like loving it too, but I was like, holy shit. That was my first Roland Sands experience at Sturgis. And I've never really been a Sturgis guy because, I'm into antique motorcycles. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I love to ride in South Dakota and everything. And, but that was my first time at Sturgis when I went with Indian.
Yeah. Well, speaking of antique motorcycles, you just showed me around your space here in Columbia. You have so many like old bikes. You even I got to a glimpse in your house, and you have some like very rare special motorcycles there. It's super cool. And I was telling you yesterday, it seems like this region in particular the culture has like a different appreciation for history. And I feel like, because you're not from here, are you?
No, I've been here, I mean, full time for 15 years, but I've been coming down here pretty religiously for 20 years.
Is that because of the antique?
No, I mean, well, there's different things here regionally. I mean, obviously, you're going to find a lot of folk art here. You're going to find maybe some Coca-Cola items more here because Coke was from the South in Atlanta, and there's things that are regional, but you're right about the history because Southerners hold on to their history more than anybody, man. I mean, they will literally let a house fall down, a building fall down because, that was Grandpa Joe's and no one's going to own Grandpa Joe's building. We want, we want it in our lives as long as we possibly can. And so, and they also hold on to, I mean, obviously not just buildings, but family history so much, I mean, like no other place in the country that I've seen. And so when I decided to come down here, there were two reasons. I had management down here at the time, and then I wanted to open a store. And then over, almost 20 years of coming down here, I actually had a lot of friends down here, and when I was pitching American Pickers for 5 years, the people down here are the ones who helped me achieve that goal. Being from Iowa, people are like, "Oh, you're pitching a TV show. How's your TV show going?" Because
You were pitching it for 5 years?
5 years, I shot the sizzle for it. I wrote I had help here in Nashville writing the treatment for it. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing as far as, really anything with it. I just had a strong passion for it. You know what I mean? And so sometimes when you have such a strong passion, even though you're naive and you don't know what the fuck you're doing, it's like the passion pushes you forward, man.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to follow that. I saw on your website a quote from the New York Times calling you the Jack Kerouac of junk.
I know. I love that too. I was like, wow, what an honor.
What do you think they mean by that?
I mean, if you read Kerouac's stuff, it's on the road. He's roaming. He's discovering relationships. He's in and out of different cultures. I think that's really,
he's always searching for something.
Yeah. And I've been doing that since I was a little kid, and so what people see me do on television, even down to the flyer, like when we go to someone's door and hand them a flyer, that's the flyer that I created probably maybe 7 years before the show. I was using that same flyer because when I would knock on people's doors, if I came to the door and I didn't have something to show them that I was like, serious, something to show them that like I wasn't there to rob them, they were like, oh yeah. And then also too, the flyer was designed when I would go to someone's door to maybe spark a memory. They're like, yeah, I might have a bicycle in the garage, or, yeah, I do have some old pottery. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody rolls up on you and is like, hey, you got any old stuff? And they're like, let me think about it. But when there's a list in front of them, they're like, yeah, I got this, this, and this. You know what I mean? So it helped me out. So actually that became part of the format of the show, and so that was the biggest thing. I think you can really, I mean, this might be a far-fetched thing to say, but I really feel like you can make a television show about anything if
you're passionate about it.
If you're passionate about it and if you can figure out the format. The format is the biggest thing, obviously. Like, look at HGTV. The format is you buy the house, you rip the shit out of the house. You have problems because it's the wrong caulk, or, oh my God, this sink is not the right sink. There's a little drama that burns through each episode. But then they restore the house and then they sell the house. Well, what I just said takes place in, 24 minutes because it's a 30-minute show and there's commercials. Like my show is an hour long and we're probably 45, 47 minutes of actual television.
I think there's just like a formula. Like if you can follow this formula, it can work for any show. It's like, I don't know what the formula is, but it sounds like it's like create like either the question or the problem, and then the curiosity that keeps you, like the hook that keeps you engaged to the end to find the resolution of whatever. Like,
yeah, I think I'm probably going to say it wrong, but tell them what they're going to see, show them what you just told them, they were going to see. And then after that, tell them what they just saw. That's the formula, you know. But I mean, when Pickers was sold, it didn't have a format. I had no format. And so, which, you know, now after being in the room a number of times and pitching some stuff and selling a few things here and there over the last 16 years, you would never, dude, be able to walk into a room, and because the first thing they're going to ask you is, walk me through an episode. Sounds great, Mike. Sounds great. Walk me through an episode. You know, and you're like, okay, well, then you have to have that format. I wasn't in the room when the show was sold, but what happened was Pawn Stars sold, and Pawn Stars was on the air for about 4 months. So all of a sudden, history was like, holy shit, you know, we have a massive juggernaut here. And so we need something to pair with it. And the production company that was representing me at the time just walked in at the right time. And I think that's why there was no format. It didn't matter. What the network saw was what I had shot over the past 15 years, you know, and so condensed obviously to 2 or 3 minutes. But anyway, getting back to the format, they all came, the network came, everybody, you know, it's the first day of shooting. So they come to my place in Iowa and they're like, okay, what are we doing? And I go, I don't know. What do you want to do? And they're like, you don't know what you're doing? And I go, well, I was waiting for you guys.
Yeah, don't you have something written?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I've never filmed a TV show before. And they're like, well, we need a place to go or something. I go, well, we can go anywhere. I go, you want to go to Pennsylvania? You want to go to New York? You want to go to Missouri? I mean, we can go to Wisconsin. We're an hour south of here and it's an hour north of here. So anyway, they're like, wow. So I said, finally, I was like, listen, I go, and they saw Danielle there and they're like, who is she? And I go, she works here for me and she's going to be giving us leads. Because, you know, when they said the show was sold, I sat Danielle down and I said, listen, I go, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I'm going to be on camera. So I can't do the research anymore. We need someone to do the research. And she said, okay. I go, I'll show you what I want you to do. And she said, great. So they said, well, we're not filming her. There's no contract with her. I said, I don't care if you film her or not. She works for me. So anyway, I remember there was an old man, they called him Goat Man, and he lived on a road called Bloody Run.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I bought some chopper parts off him a long time ago, and I actually filmed him when I was doing it. And so I said, we could go up to Goat Man's house in Wisconsin. I go, he doesn't have a phone. We can just drive up there and see if he's around, you know? I mean, I don't know what he's doing.
Everything about that sounds amazing.
So we drove up there and I said, they wanted to come to his door with me. I said, no, you're not coming here. I go, you're going to freak him out. Let me knock on the door. So I knocked on the door and he came to the door and I go, hey, I go, remember when I was here like 2 years ago filming you and I was trying to get a show? And he goes, yeah. I go, I got it. I go, see those guys down the road in those vans? He was like 4 vans and he goes, yeah. I go, well, can we film here, man? You know? And he goes, I don't give a shit. You know? So like, okay. So I waved everybody in. I'm like, here we go. This is the first episode of Pickers we're going to film. You know, I had no idea what I was doing. So anyway,
incredible.
Here's the kicker though. Frank, he wasn't there like when in the morning. And after a while, like an hour, I go, where's Frank at? And they're like, oh, he called this morning and said that he had to go to a wedding. I go, there's no wedding. I go, we know all the same people. No one's it's Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? So he just totally pussed out. And so I was by myself on making the show with them. You know,
yeah,
I was like,
day one.
Dude, I was freaking out.
Yeah.
Because anything I did, they had these things called, and you probably might have experienced this before doing what you've done in the past, on the fly interviews, OTFs. Let's do an OTF. You know, so you're there. And like, if I picked this can up, I was looking at it, you know, and they're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then, and I'd set it down there. They get their camera. Let's do an OTF about that. Like, why did you not ask anything about it? Why did you pick that up? What interests you about it? I'm like, I don't know, man. I like the color of it. So I picked it up. I go, we're not going to be doing this all day long, are we? I'm going to pick up a lot of shit. So we had to figure it all out together. But anyway, they saw that Danielle was kind of helping me with the leads and everything. And that she worked there. And so all of a sudden there was our format. So if you think about the beginning of the show, aerial shot of the van driving down the road, cut to the cab of the van, lipstick cameras, me and Frank just bullshitting about something. Ring, ring. Hey, Danny D, what's up? Hey, I got a lead for you guys. You're going to go to Goatman's. He lives on a road called Bloody Run. He's got some old chopper parts and he lives in a junkyard and he's a super, so all of a sudden that was the format. It was created literally out of necessity.
That's cool.
Yeah, we had no other, there was nothing planned about the format.
I love that because in a world where everything is like so planned and so scripted, like this thing happened naturally and organically. And I honestly, like, I think people can probably feel that. And maybe that's what makes
we were
so
totally
special.
winging it. And when we used to drive around and knock on people's doors, I'd be like knocking on their door and I'm like, hey, come on, they'll film. At first, my cameraman wanted to be there. I'm like, you can't be here because they're going to think this is like Publishers Clearinghouse or something. There's cameras. I'm on the door. I said, let me just figure out if they want to film with us, because you're going to scare the shit out of them. And so that was really what happened. And, but that was 16 years ago, dude. That was a long time ago.
It's crazy. And then since the beginning of that show, and it's been running, like you said, 16 years, people know you as this guy who's uncovering treasures hidden in backyards and barns across the country. But outside of the TV show, what does the hunt for these amazing pieces of history, like what does the actual hunt mean to you personally?
I mean, the hunt obviously is the most real thing that you might experience from it, as far as like just digging deep, and not giving up and believing in yourself when no one else does. And what I mean by that is, I might chase a bike for 20 years or more, and maybe finally get the guy's number, or find out where this person lives or what area the bike's in and just chase it down from there. You know what I mean? The Antique Motorcycle Club is a big club, but it's a big little club, meaning like, the people that are in it, that have been in it forever since the like late 50s, it's a big family. There's a lot of relationship there, obviously, a lot of like-minded people. So, when you're chasing something and you're talking to people in a region, to see if you can discover it, they'll sometimes, unless they're interested in the bike themselves, might give you a little bit of juice to roll on. You know what I mean? Like, well, the last time I heard it was in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. A guy named Art owned it. That's all I got, And so, but I was actually calling ads. Listen to this. This went on for about 10 years before the show. We have the Antique Motorcycle newsletter, right? And I had a bunch of them from the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s. And so I would look in the back of them, because they had great articles and everything. And I would look in the back and the classifieds were in there and it'd be like Indian Chief, $300, like something from 72. Yeah. And I was like, God, what it would be like to call one of these ads, So I called a couple numbers and they were disconnected, but then have you ever heard of 411 where you call for information?
Yeah.
I started calling information, and I started connecting with people. I'm like, hey, do you still have this 38 Indian 4? He's like, well, yeah, I do. How'd you get a hold of me? And I would tell him, I'd be like, dude, you ran an ad in 1974. And he's like, yeah, I did. He's like, wow, okay. You're really on it. So I would drive to Philadelphia, and buy that bike. And then usually a lot of these guys had parts or they had memorabilia or they had clothing, anything related, obviously. And I would buy that stuff too. So after a while, I got hooked up with John Parham from J&P Cycles. He had National Motorcycle Museum and he was looking for bikes. And I said, let me try to find you some bikes. So I found him like his Ivor Johnson twin. I got that out of Washington. I found him a 16 Harley out of Denver that was original paint that was insane. I found him an Excelsior twin belt drive out of Pennsylvania. I mean, I go on and I found him an Ace up in Connecticut. I mean, just on and on. And the way we worked it was anything that I brought him, he would just pay me 10% over what it was.
It's like a little commission.
So it was 30 grand. Yeah. He'd pay me $3,000. But, he also didn't want all the other stuff that I wanted. I wanted literature and I mean, eventually he was interested in that stuff, but mainly he was trying to build a museum. And so there were a lot of guys like me. There were a lot of guys feeding John's collection for him to open the National Motorcycle Museum, and he was a mentor of mine and just an incredible guy, kind of like Roland, one of those dudes that like always in the same mood.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're like that, but I'm definitely not. I'm very moody. Because just always somewhere else in my mind, romanticizing about something. I always,
100%. Yeah.
oh, dude, I always describe my mind like a
Jack Kerouac.
Jack Kerouac, but also a rodeo clown. Okay, I'm running towards you. I'm running away from you. I'm trying to entertain you. I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to get the hell out of there. That's my mind. It's just like shh.
Yeah.
All day long, and it's exhausting, especially when I'm filming because, I want everything to be so perfect, and it was driving me crazy because we would be on someone's property for 8 hours, and I thought every second had to be perfect, and that's impossible. And then I read a Dennis Hopper quote, and he said, "People thought I was a genius. I wasn't. I had moments, and those moments were enough."
That's cool.
Yeah. And so then I thought to myself, God, that's such a beautiful quote. Maybe that's all I need. I just need moments. And so then I would go through the day, and if I had a moment, I would make a note in my mind. I just had one moment, and I would get away with like kind of maybe 3 or 4 moments that I needed to, like maybe a good negotiation or me digging for something or, that the contributor telling me so much about the piece, in a personal way. Those were the moments that I needed, and so that enabled me to rest a little bit.
I feel like there's so many things you're saying about like this process of like the hunt that applies to like real life too. Just like lessons that you learn from the experience, whether it's patience or persistence or presence or like, like you said, just like appreciating moments, the good moments. It's like what kind of lessons do you think that you've learned from the process of like searching for these items that maybe apply to just life in general?
Well, there are 2 things that you brought up. One was patience, and the other one was, see, my mind's racing.
Persistence?
No, it wasn't persistence. It was patience and
Presence?
Presence. Yes, those 2 things. I pray for those in the morning. I pray for presence. I pray for patience because, I'm 61 with a 14-year-old daughter. And so I want to be present. I want to be a good listener. I want to be everything for her, But getting back to your question, the things I've learned, to be honest with you, the biggest thing is from a very young age, maybe like my late teens, early 20s, I was dealing with people at the end of their lives. When I got a call to go look at something, is usually when someone passed or they were getting ready to pass and they just wanted to sell some stuff off, So it's made me look at time differently and moments differently in life. I've watched a lot of people that have devoted their lives to collecting motorcycles and the joy that it's brought them and really kind of in a way crafted who they were because, when you collect something and you specialize in it and you spend your life devoting yourself to it, you become an expert in it. You become a mentor. And so many of these guys that I met, in their 70s and 80s, were mentors of mine over the years. They're all gone now, and I own a lot of their bikes. Unfortunately, a lot of the rarest stuff, what we call like blue chip bikes, the only time that stuff is ever going to be turned loose is when someone passes, And sometimes I'm at an auction. If I don't get a bike, then I'm bidding on, and then the other person got it. I know I'll never get that bike because that bike will be with them until the day they die. Matt Walksler is a perfect example of that. He is just as passionate as his dad at Wheels Through Time Museum. And, him and I will kind of butt heads sometimes about stuff we want. We work it out all the time because we're such good friends. But um, he keeps things and forever, and now with the museum, it goes beyond his father's life, his life. The museum will always be there, which is a beautiful thing.
What is it that draws you to these objects that other people often overlook?
Well, a lot of the stuff that I'm buying now is a different caliber from when I first started out, obviously. But, when I first started out, I would buy things that were busted up, rusty, maybe half of something, literally half of it. And back then, people were interested in pristine items. That was a time of restoration. People would take an original bike and completely restore it, make it look like a piece of jewelry. And none of that stuff really ever interests me. I think it might have been a couple mentors that helped me kind of down that path. But I
noticed that with all your bikes in here, they're not restored. You're kind of preserving the story.
Yeah, I don't want to. Like, I do have a couple of examples of a bike. Like, I just bought a 1907 Curtis Twin. I wanted a Curtis Twin so badly because of his story. But the only one I could find was restored, But now I'm on the hunt for an original paint one. I think there's, from what I know, there's 3 original paint Curtis Twins, maybe 4, in the world. So when you're looking for something that rare, the moments that you're able to achieve that goal are epic, and then you start wondering to yourself, okay, where is this going for me? Like, I'm spending all this money, I'm researching, I'm devoting my life to this collection, building this collection of pre-1915, really pre-1910 American motorcycles. What's the market going to be like? Because a lot of these guys that were collecting that stuff, they're passing, like Urban Hirsch. He was a guy out in LA that passed recently last January. They had his collection. I bought a couple bikes out of there. And I can remember Urban when he was my age, out at Hershey, Pennsylvania, buying literature from me, it's all going to come to an end for all of us, And so, these bikes, these blue chip bikes that these guys own, they, a lot of them, that were smart with their collections back then, did not paint them, did not restore them, left them the way they were. But that was very rare. Bud Akins, in Los Angeles area, he was a guy that was, obviously we all know him as a stunt man and, good buddy of Steve McQueen's and stuff and Von Dutch's and all of that circle. But he was really into pre-15 motorcycles, man. And I talked to guys down in Southern California that are in their 80s. Some of them are gone, that used to go to Bud's shop all the time. And they would tell me about how he would have all the early bikes in the back room and they were all chained together, and it's so cool back then that he loved that stuff because, he was a rider and a lot of that stuff you really couldn't ride. It was so archaic, but for him to see kind of what no one else saw, with accumulating all that stuff from that time period was pretty cool. You could really, like, to me, when I talk to motorcycle enthusiasts, if you really love something, to me, you love it to the marrow. You love it to the core of it. And you want to know more about it, And so, it took me a while to get there. I was always interested in antique motorcycles because, well, the first time I saw an antique motorcycle was on the field at Davenport. The antique motorcycle meet in Davenport, Iowa. It's the largest in the country. I grew up at that meet. I literally did. I was in my early 20s and I remember walking onto the field, man, and going, what is this? There were like 900 vendors, and every vendor had something different, unique. And most of the stuff, all of it almost, I'd never seen before in my life. And I was there to buy antique bicycles. And there was a there was an antique dealer in Davenport. He's like, you should go to the Davenport meet. And I go, what is that? He goes, oh, it's antique motorcycle meet. But he goes, they have bicycles out there. I go, really? So I went out there and I was like, holy shit.
If you ride motorcycles long enough, you start to realize it's not about if something bad will happen, it's about when. And when it does, having the right people in your corner makes all the difference. That's why I've partnered with my friends at Rider Justice. They're not just a law firm, they're actually riders. They understand the risks we take every time we throw a leg over the bike, and they're here to support specifically the motorcycle community. From helping you understand insurance coverage to being by your side to help you through the process and provide you with resources if you ever happen to find yourself in an accident. But what I really respect is what they do beyond that. Educating riders to be more prepared, hosting crucial safety training, showing up to events, supporting the community, embedding themselves in the culture, and actively working to make the roads safer for all of us. You can learn more and find the resources that you might need at riderjustice.com. So you weren't like a motorcycle lover before the antique hobby. It was, you discovered this passion for motorcycles and motorcycle history through your love of like picking and history. And
well, I grew up so the way I would describe it would be, so in 1979, dude, I was a freshman in high school. And if you think about what had happened before 79 and what was happening around 79 in the motorcycle industry, it was pretty epic. I mean, I could never afford most of these bikes because they were so expensive, you know, but like
some of the best bikes.
Oh,
from the
Z1900 came out
Yeah.
in 73, and then the CB 750 came out in 69, you know? And so all these big bikes from Japan, and then the H1s, the H2s, the two-stroke 500s and 750s, all that shit was on the road. I would see the older guys riding this stuff, doing burnouts, and then everybody had a Kirker pipe or a Yoshimura pipe, you know? I mean, KZs and GPZs and all that stuff were on the road, dude. And so I was just like in awe. I was like, wow, these guys are badasses, you know? And there were KZs, the guys were like laying down, you know, taking the shocks off the back and putting struts on them and lowering them, and, you know, custom paint jobs and shit, and, you know, crushed velvet or like velour seats on them or something, you know? Like, I remember there was a guy named, I think his last name was Gillen. Dude was built like a fucking boa constrictor, man. He was like a snake. He had like snake eyes, you know. He was always baked. And he had the baddest Cowie 900. And we were kids, you know. I was like 14 years old. We'd see him come. You could hear him coming. You'd hear him coming up to Middle Park or something, you know, the park. And, you know, you're like, holy shit, that's Gillen, man. And then you'd watch him come up. And then he'd get off his bike, and he would get off like a snake. He'd be,
that's hilarious.
Swing his leg over, you know, and you're like he was like a fucking superhero, you know what I mean? Or another guy named Al Washam. He was the quarterback at our high school when we were 8th, 9th grade. We'd like look at Al Washam going, oh my God, this dude's a badass. But he worked at the Honda dealer. So he would always have a brand new different Honda, like a 900 or some shit, riding it. And if he saw us looking at him, he would do the biggest fucking burnout ever. Like, just bake the shit out of it for a block, you know, and you're just like, holy shit. You know, so I think my first bike was a Kawasaki 100, and I traded my stereo speakers and maybe a pair of tennis shoes for the thing or something, man. I gotta have that. And it was a piece of shit. It ran, but I rode it all over the place. I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood with alleys, you know, which was the best, man. So we would just ride, we'd fly down the alleys, you know, and if the cops were chasing us or whatever, you know, we knew the alley, we knew the grit, you know what I'm saying? We knew what we were doing when it came to getting rid of anybody when chasing us in an alley, because they just, you know, because you'd go through people's yards, you know, you'd be like 3 streets over, you know, throw your bike down in the weeds and just hide out for a couple hours, before the cops would leave.
It's a different world back then.
Oh
man.
my God. But yeah, think about all that big shit. So by the time I was a junior and started making a little money doing whatever I was doing, selling cassette tapes, recording the King Biscuit Flower Hour and then selling that. We were riding big bikes, dude. We were riding, we weighed 100 pounds. We were riding 750s. We were riding 900s. We were riding that shit. Scary shit and fucking loving it, And so that was our introduction into motorcycles because like in 81, a bike from 74 was $400, And so we had a guy named Ben Bennett he lived down by the Mississippi River, and he had probably 500 bikes in his backyard. I remember he had Vincent Black Shadow too. And he had all that shit back there, and he would just get bikes running and sell them to people and stuff, And then we had another motorcycle junkyard a guy that dealt with the insurance companies, and his name was Skeff, and he would take two bikes and make one. So if he had a bike that was wrecked in the front and a bike that was wrecked in the back, he'd make you one bike, and he'd be like, you'd walk around and the shit be laying in piles. He's like, I could take that and that, and I can make you a bike out of that. Now, if you give me $3,000. And you're like, okay, and so and he would take payments too. He was the best.
That's
so he'd be like, here's $100, that's all you had because you were making $150 a week, So we had all that shit going on in our town, and it was kind of like a Stand By Me, dude, where we grew up because we grew up walking the railroad tracks. We grew up in junkyards. It was down by the Mississippi River. I remember
like a movie, man.
Yeah, there was a place called The Point where Duck Creek flowed into the Mississippi, and there were all these shacks, literally like maybe 8 or 9 shacks that people lived in, and they had like choppers out in front and like, GTOs and shit that were all beat up, and these guys were probably just dudes that just graduated Bettendorf High School and, were working at JICase or Alcoa Aluminum or John Deere, all those places were in our town. And so, and they would just, they had these bikes. That was literally the first time I ever saw a chopper. I was walking past those shacks down by the Point. Oh, what the hell is that thing, man? This is nuts. To see that. I grew up in a time when you could actually see these things running down the road. And now that these moments that everybody's trying to recreate, like the chopper scene is huge now again, obviously. And it's not just the bikes, but it's the lifestyle and the clothing and all that stuff. Seeing some dude, with, about a fucking 9-inch cuff on his jeans and some worn out engineer boots and a freaking, 1974 Sturgis shirt. You're like, okay, this guy's living it. You know what I mean? So it's cool to see that stuff come back around because I've been around long enough to experience it as a young kid,
Yeah. And it's cool that you've been able to like combine these two passions, like your love for riding that you discovered as a kid, and now this like journey you're on for like uncovering these hidden treasures. And like motorcycles are just such a cool artifact from the past. Like, what do you think makes them such interesting objects?
To me, I look at it in so many different ways. I look at the time period that they're from. I look at, what was going on in America at that time. I look at the industry overall, like where was this in the food chain? How big was this company? What did they introduce to the industry? How long were they around? How did they begin? How did they end? Because, at the turn of the century, early 1900s into, 1915, before World War I, really, like, there were so many motorcycle brands, man. There were like 300. And there's so many that people have just forgotten about until they actually see it. And you're like, that was made in Milwaukee down the street from where Harley was made.
Even walking through your house yesterday, like, I didn't know half of those brands.
Yeah, you were looking at that Pratt. You're like, what the hell's a Pratt?
Yeah.
That was a company out of Indiana that didn't actually manufacture that motorcycle. It was made by Yale, but they did change a few things to kind of to make it their own. You know what I mean? But like getting back to Milwaukee, there was the Pirate, there was the Limited, there was the Comet, there was the Merkel, obviously Harley. So there's 5 brands of motorcycles right there.
One city.
That were in Milwaukee. There's probably more, but they weren't around very long. They weren't around long enough to have a piece of literature produced. Or everybody's telling me to go to, I don't know if you've ever been on newspapers.com, something like that, where you can go, you join it, you can research stuff, you could be like, type in 19.2 Merkel, see what comes up. Like, did he run any ads back then? Was Joseph Merkel listed in any stories in 1902 in Milwaukee, that kind of stuff. So they're researching stuff, but there's a lot of bikes. Like, I have 2 bikes that I know of that just nobody knows what they are. I mean, they weren't shaped tree mechanic bikes. I mean, these were actually manufactured bikes. You can tell by the lug work and the engine case and castings. I mean, they made more than one probably, and nobody knows what they are until someone finds a piece of literature or a photograph. And then you're like, wow. Like the 19.2 Merkel that I was just talking about that I have, there's not a lot of photographs of those bikes on the road or in magazines. And prior to me acquiring that 19.2 Merkel, if you Googled 19.2 Merkel, because later on, obviously, it became Flying Merkel with a rich racing history, the only thing that came up was his patent drawings. There was nothing. So as motorcycle collectors, when we see that bike, we're all like literally like forensically looking it over, man, the way everything is done. Like, hey, this was hand soldered, all this stuff. Like, I mean, it's cool to me because his hands were on that bike. Joseph Merkel's hands were on that bike. And the front fork on it is the same, pretty much the same design of the 3 Harley, and the 4 and the 5. And then the strap tank, the oil tank above the gas tank strapped to the top tube, same thing with Harley. I think Harley's success to me is collecting this stuff and looking at their product versus someone else's. Their bikes were so much more substantial. They were very similar to a lot of these other bikes, but their frames were larger. The larger engines. Obviously, everything was single back then, pretty much. And but just beefier, healthier bikes. You know what I mean? More robust machines.
Less of a bicycle.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you still obviously pedal started it. It looked like a bicycle from far, but when you got up on it, you're like, wow, this is a different type of machine. So yeah, dude, I probably spend way too much time romanticizing about all this shit,
I think that there probably is a big element of that's what makes picking so fun, is like finding these objects, these bikes, these things, and like taking yourself back and like trying to like imagine what life was like at that time, what the world was like at that time. Even like this town you live in, like Columbia, feels very old and historical. Yeah. And you walk in the buildings and you're like, what was this like in 1910?
Yeah, that place you ate breakfast this morning, that used to be an old John Deere implement dealer. And then it was also a hardware store. And you can see that with the height of the ceilings and the wood floors. And yeah, you're right. It's got a soul to it.
I used to live in an old loft in downtown Denver in like a building from the 1800s. And it was like an old Benjamin Moore paint factory. And like you see old photos of it when it was a dirt road and they had horses out like loading up equipment. And it's like you picture like all the things that happened in this building before you were there. It's just really cool.
Well, even looking out the windows, if you're looking out the window and there's some other older structures, obviously like across the street or something, or you can see the landscape, that's the same landscape that they saw.
Yeah.
You're looking across, if you're standing in an 1860s building and you're looking across the street at an 1860s building
It's cool.
through the original glass in the building, then you're having a moment of like, wow, this is whoever was in here at that time. This is the same thing they would have saw,
Yeah, that's cool.
and so painting those pictures in my mind helps me find the words, because finding the words is the hardest part of what I do. I mean, how many times can someone see me buy a freaking gas pump? How can I take someone's imagination and connect it to this piece and why it's maybe significant to them or significant to the landscape of all of us? Why is this important? And so, I can do that with even the smallest thing, whether it's an old green toolbox or maybe
Even yesterday, you pulled out like this old American flag you got, and you're just like appreciating this piece that you found from
late
over
1800s, man.
yeah,
And
130 years ago.
And the condition of it, and when you look, remember the first thing I think we all noticed were the stars and how they were stitched on it, and
just really rough cut and like
yes,
it's really cool.
I love that early patriotic stuff. I love textiles, I mean, I love vintage clothing. I love early Southern pottery. I love, obviously advertising, anything really transportation history. When you say something like that, though, people think, okay, Petroliana, you're talking gas pumps, gas signs, cars, motorcycles, all that kind of stuff. I'm diving deeper, more into like even road maps, that people used to, they used to hand out at gas stations back then, or, a piece of clothing, or it could be like a button that a guy would have wore working in a Ford plant, with his picture on it, or obviously a part to something, a trophy. That's my love,
Trophies are cool.
Oh, dude, they're so ornate, a lot of them, and they've just like, it's blatantly right there in your face,
Talk about an object with a story behind it.
Yes. It's got the guy's name, the day of the race, with the position that he won, what he was driving or riding, what part of the country it was in, all that stuff. It's like right there for you to look at. This guy's got these Stanley steamer trophies, dude. These early Stanley, steam race car trophies. They're like 1903, 1901, something like that. They're like this big, dude. They're the most amazing silver cups. I think he wants like $35,000 for them or something. I was like, dude, I would love to own those, but I'm not going to throw down that kind of cash for them, But what I love about it, obviously, is it's the beginning of it all. Like, do you remember that Quint bike I showed you, that 5-person bike, that pace bike, what they call multi-cycles or pace bikes? That was what was pacing, like Major Taylor and a couple of the other big names on wooden tracks, dirt tracks back in the turn of the century into the early 1900s. They had 5 guys in front of one guy on a bike pacing him around.
Bicycles.
Well, bicycles. And Madison Square Garden, they would have like 15,000 people watching a race like that. So you got 2 dudes and then 2 pace machines in front, and they're just flying around, dude. And you've never seen anything that fast. And think about the riders, even on the pace bike in the front, how big and burly those dudes had to be faster than the professional racer behind them, And then 5 guys on a freaking piece of metal that heavy and big, just propelling that thing through the air.
Why did they need someone pacing in front of them?
Well, they wanted to up the game as far as like, how fast people were going and how far these races could be and all that kind of stuff, I mean, and it was obviously way more entertaining as well. There was a lot more going on, but I can't think of the Frenchman's name right now, but everything changed at the turn of the century when he brought over he had a tandem, he had a trike. might have been just a tandem and a trike, but they had Didion Bouton motors on them. They had gas, they had combustible engines on them. The French were way ahead of us in that game. We were still all, pumping steam over here in the US. And not to say that there weren't people getting into it then, but the 1880s is when they were propelling vehicles down the road to gasoline power over there. So when he brought those two bikes over, the trike and the tandem, and started pacing the racers with that, all of a sudden people were like, what is going on? Because no one had ever seen anything like that before. They'd never heard anything like that before. They'd never smelled anything like that before. They were like, what is this? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so, but they were short-lived at a lot of races. They broke down all the time. But then, listen to this, dude. At Madison Square Garden, they would have races where one dude would be on a pace bike that was a DD Bouton engine, gas powered. The other dude, the pace bike, would be steam powered.
Whoa.
Yeah, Stanley was making like tandems, steam powered tandems. So now you got a couple things going on here, man. You've got people watching a steam powered tandem, okay, and then you've got people watching a Didion Bouton gasoline combustible engine powered tandem racing against each other while there's a race going on behind them.
Bicycle race.
The bicycles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine that. On the inside of that place, 15,000 people, dude. The money that was flowing, betting and everything.
Like it.
People were like, what the fuck is going on, man? It was just like so exciting, And so then they were like, you know what? We don't need these freaking bicycles riding behind these guys anymore. We just want to see these pace bikes go at it.
How fast can they
go?
go?
What can they do? And so that's how board track racing started, in America.
Speed was like so new at that time. Like when they first invented the automobile, they thought if you went like 40 miles an hour, you would die.
Yes.
So then all of a sudden these motorcycles are going like 100 miles an hour around these board tracks. And it was probably so crazy at the time.
Yeah, everybody was just trying to outdo each other, I mean, the overhead valves, the ported cylinders, I mean, the short coupling of the frames, the lowering of the frames. I mean, there was a lot of people dying on these tracks. The speeds were becoming
a lot of innovation at that time.
Oh my gosh, and Indian, to be honest with you, they were at the forefront of all that. I mean, they were smoking Harley by let's get into like the early days, like 1907, I think Harley sold 150 bikes, under 200 bikes. In 1907, Indian was selling around 2,000 bikes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there
was that big a difference in sales. I mean, the quality and everything that Indian was doing, and they were so innovative, with introducing the twin in 7 to the public. Harley had a twin in 9 that really never made it to the public, and so when you look at like the origin of all of that, and then you're walking around in a barn and you find a rear wheel to something like that, you're like, oh my God, look at this. This is a Musselman hub, with the diameter of the rear sprocket. This had to be like a hill climb machine or like an endurance machine, and so you're geeking out not just on the wheel, but on the tire, because you're looking at, does it have a button tread? What is the durometer of the rubber back then? Is it white? Is there a blue streak in the middle of it? Like, you're looking at it forensically because you don't see a lot of those machines. And so even a pair of racing handlebars, I have a pair of racing handlebars in there, dude. I've got in a barn in Colorado on the show, actually. And man, I'll never sell those. And I'm waiting for the right project for them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm waiting for a bike to come along that deserves these bars that would have been on that bike. That's the great thing about parts, and that's why a lot of people don't want to turn loose of parts that much, because as soon as you sell it, and it's happened to me a number of times, then you need it.
I've been working with 805 beer for close to a decade now, and to me, it's much more than just a beer. I feel like they represent a way of living. 805 was born on California's Central Coast, where life moves to the rhythm of surf, motorcycles, music, and the outdoors. Whether you're coming off a ride, hanging out with friends, or watching the sunset at the end of an awesome day, 805 is right there with you. What I respect most is their commitment to sustainability. This is their home, and they treat it that way. Conserving water, reducing waste, and constantly thinking about how to do things better for the future. They support the athletes, the events, and the culture that we all care about. But more than anything, they support a lifestyle that's real. That's why 805 has been a staple in my life for so long. We feel like, we're talking about this like innovation and change of the early 1900s, but I feel like right now we're living in a time where change is happening so fast, and we're constantly looking toward the future and the next thing, and just the life is moving so fast. What role do you think like history and preservation plays in culture?
Well, I think it gets back to the roots of things. It's like embracing the roots of anything, whether it's architecture or, your hometown or, an automobile or a piece of clothing or, a photo album of your family's, like grounding us. When you get to the roots of things, to me, that grounds us. And if we can ground ourselves as a community, then we can understand each other more. I've never seen this country more divided. We look back into the 60s, when, Martin Luther King and Kennedy and so many other of our leaders were, assassinated. You think back, you're like, wow, that was a crazy time. Everybody was just trying to figure shit out, and now you look what's happening now, and with, the internet, feeding us and people being so divided politically. It's a scary time, it really is. So getting back to your statement about like how some of this stuff can ground us, I see that every day, on the field at a flea market or an auction. You might have two dudes, you can tell they're completely politically different, on two different spectrums. But when they're talking about 1912 Harley belt drive, they're like, wow, this is cool, man. Look at this. Look at the paint on this thing. There. Yeah, there's a common ground with our history, and so I hope we don't lose that, because we've lost so much of the common ground, we're talking about ground. So let's use the term erosion. There's been a lot of things that have eroded, and I see that more in the South, I think, just because, this is the Bible Belt. It's not unusual at all to walk into a restaurant here and see a large table of people praying publicly before they eat something, which I love. I love the fact that that is the culture here. You know what I'm saying? Even if you don't believe in God or if you do, to see people join hands together and embrace that moment or breaking bread is a pretty powerful thing. I don't see that where I'm from. I don't see that in Iowa, or in Chicago, not to say it doesn't happen, but here I see it. I see it constantly. And that reminds me of how deep the South is with story and rooted in, dark history, and also probably the most witty people in America, all the writers and just the beautiful moments with, entertainment over the years. And, if you look at, they call it the Americana music triangle. So you've got Nashville, Memphis, and New Orleans. And if you look at that little tiny, tiny piece of land that fits in the world, the scheme of things in the world, you've got gospel, rockabilly, country, blues,
So rich.
It's almost every genre of music was created in that little triangle. And so what was it about the South, obviously, that all of those seeds were germinated and grown? I mean, you can get into, obviously, getting back into the slave days of, them singing together in fields and what they brought over from Africa as far as instruments and all of that stuff. And then you look at what, any names from W.C. Handy to, Hank Williams, all of that stuff. So when you're in the South and you're driving on, Highway 61, which runs all the way up through America, down here, though, they call it the Blues Highway. That's where it really becomes historically significant, and I would encourage anybody to go to Clarksdale and go to Morgan Freeman's club, Ground Zero, and experience that and, romanticize about, Robert Johnson standing at the crossroads down there.
So cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And it's real, I mean, I remember Letitia and I, she's an incredible researcher. I mean, she goes above and beyond. And we were driving my old 1960 Impala. Had never been on a long road trip before. I just always drove it around town. And she's like, oh, let's just go down to Natchez. Let's go to Natchez, Mississippi. It's 7 hours from here, And so she's like, okay, I got the whole trip planned. We're going to go here. We're going to go there. And that 7 hours became 15 hours. We stopped at everybody's grave. Eric Bluesman's grave. We were in Money, Mississippi. We were in Greenville. I mean, we were just everywhere, everywhere that was significant that she could research. And it took us 15 hours to get to Natchez, in the 60 pound. The car didn't miss a lick, man. Because you get an old car like that and you break down in the middle of literally nowhere on a dirt road, a gravel road. I mean, you're out there, bro. I remember going to Mississippi John Hurt's grave, which was really, it wasn't even in a graveyard. It was just, it was in the woods, and she had these people were telling, they had coordinates. Yeah. They're like, hey, go here and there. And so we got to this spot. It was, really rural. And, we walked in the woods and you could see some stones. And you could tell that they were graves, but there were no markings on them. No one's name was on them or anything. And it was just, it was the woods, it was overgrown. And then you come onto his grave and he actually had a stone there, and around the grave, the site was cleared. There's probably a lot of people just like us, if there was branches down or anything, just clean it, and, I remember we drove out and this farmer stops us in the road. Because we were in that 1960 Impala. And he goes, man, that's a cool car. And then he saw me and he's like, man, I love your show. And I said, dude, thank you. I go, we're just down here, looking at the graves. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I own that land. He goes, that's my land. And he goes, they still bury people back there. He goes, I don't care. I'm like, that's cool.
That's wild.
Yeah. And so we drove away from that. And I was like, wow, that was interesting. It was a moment,
so much history in this region. It's there's a lot of dark history too. Like when you spend time in New Orleans, you can kind of really feel it, but there's also a lot of really incredible history with music and art and all these things. And you find it in these people's places. When you're searching these barns and these sheds and this history comes back to life. So when you're searching through all of this random stuff, how do you decide what do I take and what do I leave behind? Do things just speak to you? Is there something you're looking for?
I mean, I'm still buying the way I did when I first started doing this. I buy what I like, but obviously over years of doing it, I've crafted my eye enough to where I've been able to make a living at it, prior to the show. So, and even on the show, we sell a lot of the stuff through my shop in Iowa. But to answer that question, it's really it's really the more and getting out, talking to other dealers, older dealers, especially someone that collects something that you don't collect, finding out why they collect it, what time period that they really like, what are the highlights of that time period that they really, really love. Like Southern pottery, I've just really gotten into that over the last, 15 years in understanding it more. And even down to the utilitarian stuff, stuff like,
Yesterday you showed me this hammer axe that you got.
Yeah,
It was
I got
so
that.
sick.
Yeah, I mean, stuff that they don't make anymore where they're, the thing's like a tomahawk
Yeah.
profile, and then it's got a hammer on the back of it, and then this really amazing handle. You're like, look at this,
Yeah.
and everybody will step over that. And I'm like, I can't buy that. I can't buy that quality. I can't buy that shape. I can't buy that the way that's forged. They don't even do that anymore. I want that. That's why people collect old tools, obviously, it's one of the reasons. But I can remember years ago being in Mississippi, probably about, 25 years ago. And I was knocking on doors, and I stopped at this one old man's place because he had pinch pots, what they call pinch pots, Southern pottery on his front porch, where they actually, the clay, they would just take it and pinch it. So they kind of like all these little spikes all over it, but you can kind of see fingerprints in it,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just pots on the front porch that you would have planted plants in, So I stopped and I was asking him about those, and this guy was probably in his 80s, and I told him what I was doing. I was just driving around, and he goes, "Well, come in the house. I want to show you something really old," And this guy he was so generous with his time, but he was very, very poor. And the thing that he had that he was the most proud of was an old rope bed, where they actually strung ropes across the frame to put the mattress, ticker tape mattress on top of it. He had an old rope bed. And I said, "Man, that's really cool. That's early." And he's like, "Yeah," he was explaining to me how it been in his family forever. So I said, we talked for a while. I said, "Okay, well, I got to get going. I got to go down the road." And he goes, "Well," he goes, "if you get hungry," he goes, "or if you need a place to sleep," he goes, "you come back here and you're welcome here."
That's amazing.
And it was amazing because he didn't know me. And he probably knew me for about an hour at that time, but he was opening up his home, and whatever he had for me, he was willing to break bread with me and give me a place to rest, and for someone that's all they have, and they're willing to share that I feel is the embodiment of this Southern culture and lifestyle here.
It must be equally as gratifying just meeting the people involved in these experiences as it is finding these treasures.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, we've made great shows. Getting back to the show, I've made a great show on something I paid $200 for. I mean, literally, I remember we bought this piece, and the guy lived in a school bus, and he's like, "Yeah, man," he goes, that's a burglar alarm, look at it, you put a 22 shell in here and all this stuff, and he goes, "Put it in your window, and open the window, and it shoots him." I was like, this is wild, man. I'll take that. So I bought it.
That's hilarious.
And then we had it appraised, and it was actually, something from an old service garage where it like checked your, it's like it was a brake tool for your brakes back then, you know what I mean? Or something. I can't remember, but it was a great show because of his enthusiasm for it, where we found it, what he thought it was, and his passion for it, and the fact that the guy was in a bus. I mean, that's why I pitched the show for so many years. I would come home with a van full of stuff, and my friends were like, "Wow, man, where'd you get all this stuff?" And I'd tell them all these stories, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, no way." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they were like, "You need to buy a camera. You need to start documenting some of this stuff." And that was really the origin of it. And even when I did buy a camera, I was shooting everything on mini DVDs, little tapes. Even when I did do that, the mission of it was to tell their story, but it was for content from my website, And so, and then back then it was MySpace. Do you remember MySpace?
Yeah, this was before like YouTube or anything.
It was way before streaming. In fact, I remember when I was pitching the show, everybody was passing on the show. Everybody passed. You name it, they passed. And everybody's like, you should check out Hulu. And I was like, "What is Hulu?" And they're like, "Well, it's streaming." I'm like, "What is streaming?" And they're like, "Dude, it's this like new way to watch television. It's gonna be on the internet." And I'm like, "Man, who the fuck's gonna watch that?" I mean, as far as like competing with networks back then, you know what I mean? Like, like everything. All that stuff was new. And when we started on cable, I mean, it was golden age of cable, dude. It was the golden age of cable. I mean, we were pulling 6 million viewers, 5.5 million viewers. Pawn Stars was pulling 7 million viewers. So imagine this, okay? On Monday nights, bro, Monday Night Football, there were a lot of times when we beat the ratings on Monday Night Football. People were like, what the fuck is going on here?
Think about the visualization of that crowd, though. Like, a football stadium would be like 60,000 people. And if you imagine 7 million people all watching what you're doing at once, it's an insane visual.
Yeah, the numbers were incredible, and they were big because we were on for an hour. Pawn Stars was on for an hour. Pawn Stars was 30-minute shows back to back. So all of a sudden, if we pulled 6 million and they pulled 7 million, we were beating Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football back then was pulling 11 to 13 million viewers. So people were like, what is going on with these junk shows? What is happening here?
Right.
Bro antique shows, blue collar antique shows, dirty shit. And people were freaking out because, before that, there was the Antique Roadshow, which was artifactual television. Tell us about grandma's, mantle clock. What was she like? Why'd she like this clock? But all of a sudden we were like, grandma was telling us about her mantle clock, why she liked it. And then she's like, but I want to sell it. And then there were numbers being exchanged. So all of a sudden it became artifactual, transactional television. And then that's the same with Rick at Pawn Stars. You have the artifact. What do you want for it? Oh, I'm not really a guitar expert. Let me call a friend, and he'll come in and he'll tell us what it's both worth, and then I'll make you an offer. That was that format. So and we're both still running, Pawn Stars is still on. We're still on. We're going to start a new season, the end of August, this will be our 17th year.
It's incredible. Dude.
Yeah. But the reality of that, like why, I mean, trust me. And I've thought about it so many times, like after being on television for God, almost 2 decades now, it's like, what keeps people? And it's obviously the storytelling. That's what it is.
It's all about the storytelling. And it's like the most incredible thing about these objects that you're finding is the story behind them and the people behind them. And it's the stories of the people you meet in person, but there's also like every object you find has a deeper story to like who owned it before, where it came from. And so as you're uncovering these things, you're not just uncovering this physical thing, you're covering like a story from the past. So like when you're finding these items, do you view yourself as like a collector of rare items or more of like a storyteller of the past?
I mean, I guess a little of both. I mean, I think what's cool, what's going on right now is there's been such a resurgence in, I'm going to use the word, man. Here's the new word, vintage. People, they don't say antiques. If you're in the business in your late teens, mid 20s, your 30s, it's vintage, it's not antiques, and it's not picking, it's called sourcing. And so, but the common ground there, the interesting thing is the story, being that storyteller, and then visually being able to show these places, because people, place, and thing is really why the show is successful, and why I say to people all the time, I'm like, listen, this is all of our show. This is a show about all of us. I was just a guy from Iowa that had a good idea, and I was passionate and crazy enough about it to pitch it for 5 years. But the reality of it is a show about all of us. Okay. And so like right now, when you look what's happening in the world, I think this was the first year that vintage clothing outsold new clothing.
It did?
Yes. Billions of dollar industry. When you look at hi-fi, when you look at anything from the 80s, anything from the 90s, you know, all of that stuff is being consumed by people that are much younger, and they love the story, they love the history of it, they love the presence the piece, gives a room, so aesthetically, when you look at what's happening in the with decorators and designers, and you look what's happening in the fashion industry, and you look what's happening in the automobile and motorcycle industry. Look at Harley just put out a bike this year, and so did Indy, and it looks so much like, a 40s one. Like the other day I was on Instagram, I saw Brittany Olsen riding down the road on an Indy, and I'm like, man, that thing's, look, they're getting it. They're getting it more now. The way the fenders are skirted, the position that you sit on the bike, solo seat, the front end of the bike, all that stuff. If somebody rode by like on a landscape, pretty fast,
you might think it's an old bike.
You might think it's an old bike, and that's what they're trying to capture, and that's what Harley's trying to capture. That's what Volkswagen's trying to capture with their new electric micro bus van. All that stuff, all of it's coming back around. So the point I'm trying to make, and to answer your question in a roundabout way, it's like, all of that stuff matters so much to us that now it's falling more mainstream into everything that we're doing. Like I was just watching like Stopnik and Matt South and who else was on it? Maddie was on it. All these guys were riding their choppers, up the coast, and I think they went up into the redwoods or something. But dude, it wasn't obviously about the chopper. I mean, obviously, everybody's looking at each other's builds. They're like, dude, you're fucking brilliant, man. I love the way you rake that shit. Oh my God, that paint job looks real, shit. Oh my God, I built this bike out of a gas tank. Fuck. It's like, look how much rust is on those rims, all that kind of shit. It's like the dirty biker culture, lifestyle, music, fashion, place, time, all that shit going down the road at once. Well, guess what? They're not obviously the first to do it, but it's cool that they're carrying that flag and still burning that torch. You know what I mean? They're like living that lifestyle. They're like living it. And that's the great thing about it. To go to like a motorcycle show back in the 70s and 80s and 90s when dudes were like building big street, freaking wide as like Billy Lane shit, the fucking helicopter bearings in the rear wheel and no hub, all that kind of stuff. I love Billy, so I could say it. But Billy was different because his shit was authentic, meaning like he would take old doorknobs off of like, doors, and he would, use older materials on the bike anywhere he could. And he was really replicating that era. He was the guy that was, there were a lot of guys like, remember, American Chopper, all that kind of stuff. What was happening with the Tuttles and everything. Those bikes were new bikes. They were choppers, but they were new bikes. They were a new look to them. Everything was new. Where Billy was really capturing moments in time and pushing that stuff forward in a way. I remember when all that stuff was hot. How old were you when that shit was going down?
I mean,
when American Chopper popped.
Early 2000s. I was, 12.
Yeah, but you probably watched it.
I watched all those shows.
Yeah, and what was interesting to you?
I loved West Coast Choppers.
Yes.
I liked that one. I mean, to me, I don't know. For everyone, it was motorcycles, and I liked motorcycles. But I don't know what's interesting. I think it's just the format of the show. They have a way of keeping you engaged in like the process of the build, and there's always some drama. So it's always like, the dude didn't pay me, and we got to track down the money, or we got to finish the bike by this
to Florida.
Yeah, by next week. We got to get it done.
I got to build this bike in an hour.
Are we going to get it done? And like, so you just keep watching it. And so,
which is similar. Look at it.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and HGTV?
Right.
Okay. Like, they're starting with nothing.
We've got a $40,000 budget to remodel this house. Yeah. What can we do?
And we got to do it in 3 days. And then after that, we got to ride it to Florida, or after that, we got to sell it. You know what I mean? There's always that time crunch thing going on. And it's obviously worked for so long. A good friend of mine is Ty Pennington. Do you remember that? Move that bus, on ABC, Extreme Makeover. But it got so crazy to where they're like, we're going to give you, and your grandkids and your grandkids, we're going to pay for all you guys' college. Here's an Escalade. You're going to need 7 bathrooms, all this shit. We're going to give you free clothes from from Sears forever until you die. And then when you die, the free clothes continue with your grandma and everyone else, I was like, it got so far-fetched, but people were digging it. And all that stuff is still alive. You know what I mean? I mean, like Paul Jr. is a good friend of mine. We talk every once in a while, and he's still embracing a lot of the show that he did. His show was on, I think he told me, like on 16 years as well. There was a year they sat out just like we did. We just got done sitting out about 9-10 months. Now we're going back into it. So it's a very similar path, but he's still living that lifestyle and collecting and building things and being an innovator, So I think the most authentic shows, like you brought up Jesse, I've been fortunate enough to like go to a wedding of his, and I don't remember which one it was as far as, but like be at his shop a couple times, with him and stuff. And I mean, he's an authentic dude, man.
Yeah.
He really is. I mean, he's a no bullshit kind of guy. He's a big motherfucker, and he's intimidating, but when you're on a common ground about like talking about 36 knucklehead parts or whatever it is, everything falls away and it just becomes about what we're looking at and about what we're talking about, and then he'll, bust out a Thompson machine gun and he's like, you want to fire this thing, dude? And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. I'm going to be fucking James Cagney for 2 minutes.
That's awesome.
Blasting this thing. And he's all those guys are.
It's that common ground, man. It's like we've been talking about throughout this whole thing. No matter how different you are, like motorcycles bring you together. It's like these shared interests that bring you together. One thing I wanted to ask you, like, about all these different objects you find and like the human stories behind it. Has there been like one particularly powerful human story behind a piece that you've found?
Oh man, that's a heavy one. And to be honest with you, there's just been so many.
Yeah, it's probably hard to even think of a singular one.
I can think of like, moments obviously before the show when it was just me on someone's property with them, spending time with them, and being truly interested in what they have to say, and at the simplest form, everybody wants to be seen, everybody wants to be heard. And so, a lot of these people that I was dealing with 30 some years ago that had accumulated all this stuff, their collections really became the only social outlet they had. And then as their friends got older and their friends passed, these guys would have stopped going to the meet. And so, because their friends weren't there anymore, there was no camaraderie with it. And so then they're left with barns full of bikes, houses full of bikes. And when someone younger shows interest in it, they're like, wow, let me tell you about this, and let me tell you about that, and let me show you this bike, and let me tell you where I got it, and let me show you the photograph I have with it. All of that stuff, all of a sudden they're being seen and heard again. And to spend so much time with so many people that literally at the end of their collecting years, you know what I mean? They devoted their lives to it, and they've surrounded themselves with it, and it has brought them joy. But at some point, most of the time, not all the time, they realize like, I got to start selling a couple of these things. I got to start selling some of this stuff unless I have a family member that wants it. And so to see people in their sometimes most vulnerable state emotionally, because these things are such a big part of their lives, is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful thing. I can remember there was an old man, his name was Earl Chalfont, and he lived in Pennsylvania, and he was a president of Four Cylinder Club for a very long time. And I had got to know him. I think he had one or two bikes left. And, he took me out to his barn, and he had a shed out back behind his property, and everything was literally gone. He had a fire. There was a fire years before, and it just took his whole collection. And I can remember standing out there with him. It was like the golden hour, Pennsylvania is so beautiful. And him describing what the place used to look like and the things that he used to have. And I remember he had a bunch of old carburetor bodies, anything aluminum would have melted off of them. And I said, man, you still got all these old carburetors. And he's like, well, they're just, they're junk. They're just laying there in a pile. There was probably 100 of them, like in a pile. And I go, I would like to buy these. And he was like, you would? I go, yeah, absolutely. I go, somebody will want these, somebody will do something with them. And I can remember like walking to my van with a wheelbarrow full of carburetors, literally. And I just had this most incredible, like euphoric moment where I was like, I felt like maybe for one of the first times in my life, like so complete, meaning like truly loving something that I love to do, like being in that, like being with him sharing everything about Indian 4-cylinder is just like with me. It was just like I had this, it was almost like a dream state. And I remember going up to the back of my van and putting them and I just said to myself in my mind, I was like, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. I want to feel like this the rest of my life, And so far that's come true.
They're probably sad to let these items go sometimes because, like you said, they mean so much. But it also probably feels good to let these go to someone who they know really cares about what they're purchasing.
Yeah,
so they know
they want to know that the person understands what it is.
Yeah,
if they're going to let it go. But hey, listen, man, there's tons of guys out there that they don't want it. They have it until they die. There was a guy named Jules in New Jersey that Jersey John and I would go see all the time. And he was always so fucking grumpy, dude. I mean, just like the grumpiest dude, but he'd show us around, and like we were just punk kids to him. He was probably in his late 80s, and I'd be like, how much is this gas tank? I'd never sell that, and I'm like, oh shit. Okay. So, this happened over and over again. Me and Jersey John would stop by there if we were in his area. And he had a 1905 Indian that was unbelievable, original paint. And so Jersey John told me this story. It was so funny. He said he went over to Jules' house and he knocked on the door and some guy came to the door. They said, hey, is Jules here? And he goes, oh yeah, he's right here. And he went in the living room and Jules was in a hospital bed in the living room. And his 1905 Indian was leaned up against the hospital bed. He had his bike right there. He's so fucking cool. He was such a badass. And Jersey John's like, the guy was the nurse, taking care of him. And Jersey John's like, man, Jules, how you doing, buddy? And they exchanged, stories and stuff and everything. And Jersey told him, hey man, you mean a lot to me, just kind of saying goodbye to him. He knew he was probably going to make it too much longer. And, Jersey and Jules couldn't even speak, Jersey was just talking to him. And he had this Indian right there. Like he could put his hand on it. It was leaned against his bed. And so Jersey was walking out the door. He said, this was the funny part. Jersey was walking out the door and he always had a 1915 Indian twin engine on the porch. Like it was a screened in porch. And Jersey said he walked out and said, Jules, what about this Indian engine? And Jules just goes like this from the bed, flipped him off. So to the end, dude,
not getting rid of
Jules was like, I'm taking this shit. This is going to be here until I'm gone.
That's so funny.
Until I'm gone. And that's, and speaking to and Jersey John, him and I have been on the road together for years and years, and we obviously like the same stuff. But, I was saying to him the other day what I was saying earlier to you. I said, man, who's going to buy this shit? Like a lot of the guys that are into the same stuff I'm into, this really early stuff, they're all passing away. It's like, what is the market going to be? I was like, I have a lot of money invested in this stuff now. And he goes, what do you care? oh, what do you mean? I mean, I have a lot of money invested in this stuff. You know, I'm really starting to, you know, accumulate, you know, a huge collection here. And he goes, dude, he goes, does it bring you joy? I go, yeah, it does. He goes, and that's the only thing you got to worry about. He goes, after you're gone, he goes, Charlie is going to get what she gets at auction. She's going to keep what she's going to keep, and it's all going to go away, you know. But as long as it's bringing you joy in your lifetime and you can afford it, then buy it and build that collection, build the best collection that possibly can, you know. And that's really what I've been working on here at Motor Alley.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a great backdrop
It's
for
impressive.
it. Yeah. I remember I always am interested to hear what people are saying when the door opens. You know, I open the door and you're like, holy wow, man. Holy crap. I remember you saying that going, okay, well, he gets it. You get it.
Before Aero was a helmet brand, it was a belief. In 1986, a craftsman named Antonio Locatelli started building helmets out of a small factory in Bergamo, Italy. For over a decade, he honed his craft in silence, learning everything there was to know about helmet safety and technology. Then in 1997, he created the brand Aero, and he built it around one idea, that every rider deserves a champion's helmet. Not a watered-down consumer version of it, the exact same helmet worn by champions on race day, with over 160 world titles, is the same one you can buy today. One helmet, one standard. That's not just a marketing line, it's a philosophy. Safety before anything else. Whether you ride on the dirt or the street, you can find your next helmet at aerousa.com. It's insane. And what I love is it's not just like a random collection of bikes. Like you have very specific things you're looking for. And it's just like, it's not like you just have like one bike from like this era. It's like all these incredibly rare, incredible bikes with like so much history. And it's this era that I always fantasize about. Like, I wish they would make a movie like Seabiscuit, that horse movie.
Yeah.
I wish they would make like a really well done Hollywood movie about board track racing.
Yes.
I think it would be so cool.
Well, it's funny you say that because a friend of mine in Nashville here, he's done a couple movies. He's like, we should do that. Because I found a photo album from a track. And he's like, look at all these guys' faces. Look at their names. And written after their name, the person had taken the time to write dead, you know. Yeah, this guy dead, you know.
Dude, that was one crazy thing in your warehouse here. Like you showed me this photo of a board track racer, and the writing on the image said "dead 5 minutes after this photo was taken."
Yeah, I mean, it was a brutal time. I mean, it was an innovative time in America for motorcycles and racing, but it took a lot of lives. You know, a lot of these guys that were racing those bikes were not motorcycle riders, obviously, because there were no motorcycles prior. And they were offered, you know, money to risk their lives on these velodromes and these tracks throughout America.
They were like the gladiators of that time.
They were totally the gladiators. You know, if they got too high on the dish, man, they were just gone into the stands, and then they started killing spectators in the stands. And that's when everything was really shut down. I mean, for a while, there's a lot of, in that photo album I was telling you about, there's a lot of newspaper articles where they call them murder-dromes.
Yeah.
You know, and they talk about the amount of people and the young people that are dying. But, you know, I mean, it was also a time, you know, when American industry was big, but maybe not so big in a lot of different areas. And so a lot of young guys saw, oh my God, they're going to pay me $20 or $100. I mean, that was a ton of money back then, you know, and then they saw the fame and the glory too. If you were to live and do it over and over again, then you had the fame and glory.
And then there was a quick rise and then a quick fall. And then there's empty board tracks across the country that just kind of.
Yeah. Some of them, I mean, they were able to survive. I mean, look at Baldwin Jones, man. I mean, he raced for, Flying Merkle forever and a couple other brands for a short period of time. But, you know, if you look at Stephen Wright's book, American Racer, you know, Baldwin Jones, there's a picture of him as an old man with his wife in the book. You know, I think he passed in the 70s or something, you know. I mean, the guy lived through it. You know, I can't even imagine being able to talk to somebody like him. But, you know, over the years, like I remember there was an old guy named Louis Bartley, and he lived in Illinois City, Illinois, which was basically a bar and a post office. And he had every 4-cylinder dude in trailers on his property. And he was just the most amazing, cool dude and old man. And McQueen would fly into Moline with a fake beard and hat on. This is when he was the biggest movie star in the world. And Louis and his wife would pick Steve McQueen up and take him out to his barn in Illinois City, Illinois, for him to look at 4-cylinders and buy some bikes. And you think to yourself, well, this is bullshit, he's telling you. And then he starts showing you the pictures like they were nailed to the wall of his barn. He's like, well, here's when Steve was here and he was here. And Steve McQueen used to go to Davenport too.
That's cool.
Yeah, he would go to the Davenport Antique Motorcycle Meet.
Here's another guy like Bud Akins, who's like a true lover of motorcycling, like a real rider and enthusiast.
Yeah, if you look at his auction, if you ever able to pick up a catalog, I mean, he had 500 motorcycles or more, and the cars that he had. Oh yeah. There's a lot of people who are like, I got a Steve McQueen motorcycle. And you're like, yeah, you and 499 other people do.
Yeah.
But still, it depends on the significance of the bike. And a lot of his bikes, when I say a lot, there were a number of his bikes that were painted by Von Dutch.
That's cool.
And so you've got all those relationships there that we romanticize about, and so to talk to, like, I was in, I think it's in, was it San Paulo, where the McQueen's airplane hangar is. It's outside of Ojai. I went there one time and Steve McQueen had a little office built next to the airplane hangar, and you walked in and there was an office with a roll top desk. It was oak, a lot of oak furniture. And then you walked through there and there was a bed. He had his bed there. And so you're just like, going, dude, this is where he chilled. He wanted to be near his stuff, and I have, even in my building, I don't know if you saw it, but I have a cot in there.
You ever stay there?
Yeah. I'll take a nap, because like it's sometimes, it's the most peaceful place to me because I'm around everything that brings me so much joy, but also too, it can be a mental marathon because, when you're researching some days and you're really trying to dig into something, it's mentally, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, man. I've been very blessed. I don't take it for granted at all. I've seen a lot of my mentors pass over the years, and even Matt Woxler, him and I, every once in a while we'll talk about Dale and what he meant to me. And that was his dad, he taught him everything he knew really in the motorcycle world. And, we talk about like this is being our time. This is our time right now, because in my industry, there's a saying that all your shit's going to end up on someone else's trailer someday.
Yeah.
And it's true.
It's true.
All these collections that we build, the life that we create around them and for them will be completely disassembled, and I've seen that over and over again. And, you can look at that as a sad thing, but I tend to look at it as a beautiful thing.
Gives you more reason to enjoy it right now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Hey, it's you and I, our common ground is motorcycles. You were telling me your past with the magazine and racing and everything. And, it doesn't matter how you get there. It's like just getting there, and being involved. And
yeah,
I love what you're doing.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing. And I know you've hinted a few times throughout this interview that you've been following this path long before the TV show. How did you initially get into picking? Like, where did this obsession come from?
Oh man. If you want to go way back into it, I was a kid walking to school. My mom, worked a factory job, and it was my brother and sister and I at home. We would be home by ourselves for maybe an hour, before we went to school. And so I would walk to school on my own by the time I was 5. And so, walking past big garbage piles and shit and seeing stuff in the garbage that was cool, like old STP stickers or a bicycle or a jack-o'-lantern after Halloween, all that stuff interests me, and I'd bring it home. And it really fed my imagination. Haven't you ever seen, like, do you remember being a kid, you had your army men, and you line them all up, little plastic army men, and you've got the the captain and the sergeant and all that stuff. And you're like playing and you're bumping them together and you're like, you're playing, or like young girls playing with doll houses, and it's their imagination is what's painting that picture for them. Well, that's what was my biggest imagination that really thrived was the older things I found, like it could be a cigar box,
And you just never let that go. Like
I've never grown up.
It's that childhood fascination and wonder with the world and curiosity and imagination. A lot of people lose that.
I know. Well, it's easy to lose because once you have kids and you've got the minivan payment and the mortgage and, you're saving for the 401 and, you've got, kids in college and high school and all that stuff. I took a different path. I didn't have my first kid until I was 47. I saw friends of mine, even my brother, I saw him struggle. He had 5 kids, and he was always, working for himself. He was an entrepreneur and we both were. I owned bicycle shops but when eBay came out, that changed my industry forever, obviously, because, guys like me, I never got the last dollar for something because I sold to dealers, but when eBay came out and I started putting stuff online, I got the last dollar for stuff. And then eBay also brought more people to the marketplace. So when I started scouring America, when I sold my bike shop, when I closed my bike shop, I had a cell phone, a cargo van, and a website. And it was just me. That was my business. A cell phone, cargo van, and a website. And you can still make a living doing that. Now, with technology the way it is, you can literally find something, take a picture of it, put it online within minutes of you actually pulling it out of a barn, drive down the road, boom, your phone goes off, it's sold, pull over in the next town to a post office and mail it. And then with Venmo and PayPal and all this other shit, and be paid for it instantly.
That's crazy to think about.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about living your life like that, because it's you're a nomad, you're a seeker, you're seeking for treasure. You don't know where you're going to end up, because you could be at someone's house for 8 hours and then all of a sudden you drive through the night, maybe 3 hours, and then you spend the night at a hotel. You wake up and you're like, wow, this is a cool looking town. I'm going to spend some time around here for a day, and drive around some alleys. Man. Yeah. It's like, you never know. Like when me and Frank would hit the road when he wasn't working, and he would come out with me on the weekends, we'd do long weekends. We would just drive way up into Minnesota, and then we would both see an exit and we're like, how's that look? He goes, looks good to me. And we would just get off on the exit and we would just drive on gravel all day long, knocking on doors, handing out flyers, going into small towns, putting up flyers in cafes, handing out stuff. And a lot of times, in these rural parts of America in the Midwest, you wouldn't see farmhouses for quite a while. It could be 5 miles between each one. I can remember being on a guy's property in Minnesota, and he was in his 80s. And I just remember him because of how content he was in his life. And I said, how long does it take to get to Minneapolis from here after we bought a couple things? He goes, I don't know. He goes, I've never been there. I go, really? I go, you never been to Minneapolis? I go, what's your closest town here? He goes, there really isn't one, And so in a roundabout way, I finally figure out that he has been on his farm. He has been to his church. He has been to relatives' houses around the property, all around the property. And that's the only place he's ever been.
That's wild.
But it is wild. But to think about how like joyful and content and beautiful your mind and your body and your surroundings would be if like
you don't have all of the worries of the entire world in your mind at all times.
Yeah, he was a hardworking farmer. That,
probably self-sustaining on his property. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was interesting to me. And I remember me and Frank drove away and I was like, God, man, that's so crazy. The dude's never been away from there. And
those are cool experiences you get to have. Yeah. It's cool that you got to like take this this like childhood fascination and turn it into like a passion that you carried with you, and like you had this dream of making it a career, and you had this idea of this TV show, and at first nobody believed in you. What advice would you give someone who has a dream that maybe the world doesn't understand yet?
Oh man. Well, I can start out by saying, no one believed in me when I was from, I was such a little shit, and I was always a daydreamer. I can remember being in first grade or something, and my teacher took my desk and pulled it up to her desk. So I was staring at her as close as I am to you, and everyone else was behind me because she knew I just was looking out the window the whole time. Yeah, I was always in trouble. I was, and I was picked on all the time, and I think that's how I would get into trouble, But I feel like I've always been kind of the underdog just because I was so little. And when I was in ninth grade in high school, I was 4'11" and I weighed 87 pounds. And I know that because I wrestled at 90 and I had to weigh in with my clothes on. I was so little, I was little. I was a little underdog, and I was wiry and scrappy. And, but anything that I really had in life, from a mom that worked, full time to raise 3 kids on her own. My dad left when we were 2. He abandoned us basically when we were 2. And she gave us everything that she possibly could. She worked hard, and she was a great example, for us, my brother and my sister and I. But, getting back to your question, to grow up with that kind of background and that kind of desire and that kind of stick-to-itiveness, and understand that like, anything is really possible if I could work hard enough, And so when the show idea came around, it was easy for me to film all these people and to be a part of their lives because I'd done it for so long. The hardest thing obviously was the editing part of it and the treatment that I wrote, and with a friend of mine here in Nashville, and just like kind of understanding it. But to get to the origin of your question was, I was really like a sponge, and I was also like a chameleon, meaning like, when someone would pass on the show, I would ask the production company, why'd they pass? Well, they didn't like this, or they didn't like that. And I'm like, well, then that's valid. We probably should change that.
Not looking at things as failures, but as lessons, right?
Exactly that. But also too, being willing to change it, being willing to
accept criticism and feedback
and change my idea. Like what I was pitching the first year was completely different than what I was pitching the 5th year with the show, And so learning from most of my edits, what I knew about edits was I really started paying attention to the shows I was watching on TV, and how they would end a scene, how they would come into a scene, how long was a shot? Was it a follow shot? Was there a POV shot? Was there any kind of voiceover involved? All of that kind of stuff, was running around in my mind when I first started filming the show with a crew, because I'd been filming by myself for 5 years, and so, like if I was to buy something from you, it was just you and I on your property, I would hand you my camera and I would say, would you film me? And I would always say, is my face in the shot? Because most of the time I would get home and, they had my feet or they're like, so I'm like, can you see my face? And they're like, yes. I go, okay, so I'm going to talk about this. Okay, I'm talking about this right now. Can you still see my face? And I found these young guys to do some editing, and they were great, and they were like, and I was paying them though, I can remember I had all these mini DV tapes. And I met this guy because somebody said, you got to meet Justin. He's a really cool dude. He can edit your stuff. So I met him at a Starbucks in town. And I told him what I was doing. And he goes, well, what do you want it to look like? And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you that. I go, that's up to you, dude. I go, I want to see what you can do with it. I go, here's all my tapes. He's like, oh, okay. He goes, I don't know shit about antiques. And I said, that's cool. I like that. I said, most of the people are going to watch this don't know shit about antiques. So you're perfect. And I said, he goes, well, it's going to be expensive. And I go, what do you want to like, cause I wanted him to like create the beginning of the show, like an intro, and then maybe, like 2 minutes of whatever I was doing, whatever me and Frank were doing. And so he goes, $300. And I go, I just pull it out. I pulled $300 out of my pocket and I threw it on the table. I go, there you go, dude. I go, get to work. And so I didn't see the little son bitch for like a month and a half or hear from him. I was like, holy shit, that kid's got my tapes. What is going on? Is like, I don't even know shit about anything. And then I finally get a hold of him and he's like, oh yeah, man, I'll have something for you tomorrow. Like I doubt he even worked on anything, but he was fast with shit. He did an intro to the show. I was like, wow, this is cool, dude. He goes, you like it? I go, yes, absolutely. Cause he was really into graphics and all this crap. I go, this is great. And so I think I might have put that on MySpace back then. It's the same thing. Like right now, if you look at all these musicians or, fashion people or anything, they were discovered on TikTok. Well, back then you were discovered on MySpace. It's kind of the same vibe. Obviously everything's changed dramatically in our lives and technology and stuff. But, it was really, the World Wide Web has changed, obviously, everything in a great way and everything in a really bad way. And, but what is true to the root of all of us is, for one, storytelling is still the oldest profession in the world. Two, people really, truly love history, whether it's theirs or someone else's. Three, people want to surround things with things. They want to surround themselves with things that inspire them. And four, there's so many people out there that haven't forgotten what it's like to be a kid. They still want to get to that flea market, or they still, can't drive by that garage sale. They got to do a U-turn and see what's on that table or maybe in the back of the garage. All of that never is ever going to leave us. And that's why
you're speaking to those people.
Yeah, that's who I'm speaking to, So it's pretty cool.
Is there anything specific that you're searching for right now?
I mean, I've been studying a lot and talking to people about early denim, from the late 1800s, obviously. And so that stuff really interests me. I've found some things from the 20s and 30s, but I've never really found anything from that time period. It'd be neat to see something like that in a shed or a barn. We're constantly still in spaces that literally time is forgot. Like when we walk into a space, whether it's a basement of a house or an attic or a barn or a chicken coop or a shed, and it's piled with stuff, and you can just tell, dude, that no one has been in there in decades.
There's going to be something.
There's just, even if there isn't anything, the excitement of going through that is like, oh my God, it's like, it's the most euphoric, high that you could ever imagine.
If you look at your own story, the hunt, the finds, the people along the way, what wisdom would you hope others take away from your journey?
I think a couple different things. I want people to know, obviously they do know now, that people, places, and these things matter. And that the smallest story can be the biggest story to us all. And that these places exist.
You're right.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
People are like watching, they're like, God, man, where the hell are you? And I'm like, I'm in Missouri. I'm an hour south of St. Louis right now. These places do exist.
And they matter.
Yes, and they completely matter. And that's why I say, always that it's a show about all of us. It really is. And now with everything the way it is, I hope that people can still watch it or communicate with each other on common ground, because we're so interested and so quick to draw how different we are from each other. I think I think that's what I would like people to see and hear when they watch the show is that we can find it.
That's perfect. I think that's a great way to end it, man.
Thank you,
I
buddy.
know you are a busy dude and you've always got a lot going on. So I appreciate.
Yeah, well, thank you for being patient with us.
Yeah, dude. I mean, circumstances were crazy.
Yeah.
We didn't really get into it in the interview, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys, you know, are relatively okay after that accident. And it was a really scary
situation. I mean, neither of us should really be here, you know. I mean,
especially
it was pretty bad.
in the vehicle you were driving with, like, you know, the lack of safety technology.
Yeah. How small it was. 58 Porsche versus an Escalade.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, things can change immediately.
Instant,
yeah. I mean, we were just driving home, planning our evening, and a drunk driver had a different plan.
And were you guys just driving and he kind of just pulled out in front of you?
Yeah. So imagine we're just driving down Highway 7, which is 4 lanes. And, you know, you're at 50, 55 miles an hour, just leaving town. And he just flew out from a side road. So it was literally just seconds that I had to kind of
turn a little bit.
Yeah. I just remember going, what the? And then the hood, I can remember the hood of the car
crumpling up
like a tent. And then nothing, you know, we were both out.
We were both out
completely.
Did it hit Letitia's side?
Like, and so that I was trying to swerve, you know, because I saw it. I just was swerving.
Right.
But my guy that works on a lot of old Porsches, he's like, dude, he goes, if you wouldn't have swerved, you would have been dead.
Because you would have hit the steering wheel.
No, I did hit the steering wheel. I broke the steering wheel in half, but the way the car is designed, the battery is in the front and then the gas tank is right behind the battery. And so the front of the car would have completely collapsed and the car would have exploded. But since I turned just a second, it hit the headlight on her side, the headlight and the front wheel. And that's where it took the biggest impact, unfortunately, on her side, you know. And I have seatbelts put in all my old cars, you know, lap belts. But, you know,
did they not come with seatbelts? Like,
no, I don't think seatbelts were legal until like where they made manufacturers put them in. I think it was 63, you know? And so, when I woke up, I mean, there was just gas pouring into the car.
No way.
Yeah. And I couldn't get out of the car because my wrist was messed up from the steering wheel. My knee had hit the dash. And, I just remember he got out of his Escalade and he was standing there. This is no bullshit. He was standing there smoking a cigar, watching me. What? And I was screaming and pleading with him to help me get out of the car. Please help me get out of the car. There's gas in the car. And he just stood there watching me like he was watching a movie or something. He just stood there, didn't say a word, didn't say anything. Finally, people came and a guy pulled my door open and I got out of the car and I limped across and I said, we got to get her out of the car.
Was Letitia still out cold?
She was out. Yeah. And so we got her door open and that guy was just standing there lurking with his cigar and there was even more gas pouring into the vehicle at that time. And I said, we got to get her out of this car. And so, you know, we laid her back and pulled her out and put her on the road away from the car. And then literally I just passed out after that. I was just so much adrenaline. I woke up in the ambulance and I can remember them talking to each other and calling the helicopter to come get her.
So you were in an ambulance and she was in a helicopter? Yeah,
they flew her out right away. And later on, I ran into a police officer probably about a month ago. And he goes, hey, I was on scene. I was one of the first on scene when you guys had your accident. And I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. You know, thank you. And he's like, I'm the guy that arrested him for drunk driving and on scene. And he goes, I just want to tell you, he goes, I've been on a lot of accidents. He goes, that was the worst. Letitia was one of the worst people I've ever seen. Laying there on the road like she was. He goes, none of us thought she was going to make it.
My God, dude.
And so,
It's so scary.
yeah, her face was just
You saw
so
her,
swelled
like,
up.
when you woke up, you could, like, see her.
I woke up and, I remember my glasses were smashed onto my face and I was like bleeding, into my eye. So it was kind of blurry vision. And I looked over her and she had her head back and she was out and she had a little bit of blood coming out of her mouth. And then that guy was standing there.
It's like the most horrific
It was crazy.
thing I could imagine.
It was, everything was in seconds. Like if I wouldn't have jerked the wheel, we would have hit head on. If my car was traveling just a few miles an hour faster, we wouldn't have T-boned him. He would have T-boned us and killed us both. That Escalade would have went right through that little Porsche, So the whole thing, just the timing of all of it is just
microseconds.
It was such a God thing. It was such a God thing. And I almost didn't drive that car that day. And the only reason I didn't is because her and I were doing a photo shoot with a buddy of mine, Robbie. And I thought, you know what? I'll drive an old car. He's probably going to want to get a shot of us in an old car. If we would have been in my SUV, we would have just walked away from it, with the airbags and being in a big SUV like he was. So, the amount of outpouring love that people have shown us, and especially her, I had the steering wheel to hold on to and it broke, and then the steering column just rammed me in the chest. I had a big indentation in black and blue. I was really lucky there because a lot of guys were like, dude, he goes,
it could have impaled you.
Yeah, exactly. They actually said that Volkswagen and Porsche changed their design after so many years of doing that because of the way that it was collapsing. It didn't collapse. But anyway, Tish and I mean, she went through so much more than I did. I mean, I fractured my wrist, my nose, my knee is still messed up from it and tore everything in it, but her mouth was wired shut. She lost 23 pounds. I mean, the amount of pain with her intercostal nerves between her ribs and, her literally her jaw just went like this.
Yeah.
Because it broke at the hinges and then it broke in the middle and just separated, And she broke her sternum. She broke her ribs. She had a punctured lung,
I don't know how she survived, dude.
She's a badass, man.
Not only that, I'm at a hotel in Cave City and she's dying and she has the wherewithal to tell her sister, hey, text that dude and let him know.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, why are you even worried about me?
She's just the most organized person I've ever met. She is by far, I'm not kidding you, probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, there's a lot of people that you could say, they're book smart, street smart. She's all of that. And then add a photographic memory to it. And then the passion to want to research things so deeply. She's a savant, man, in some ways, and then on top of that, she's a motorcycle racer. She's a motorcycle rider. She grew up in a roadside attraction. I mean, her background with modeling and, entrepreneurship and, right now she's hyper focused on Cave City. She wants to save that town. And that's why her and I really got together and started talking a lot because, she was interested in working with her community, and I had done that a lot, being on city council where I was and working with tourism boards and being here in Tennessee and doing the same with, there's, when preservation happens, it's on so many different levels. So you look at building entrepreneurs, the people that buy the buildings, restore the buildings, fix them so entrepreneurs can be in that building, and so, and then you've got tourism boards, and then you've got city councils, and you've got mayors, and you've got counties. Is everyone on the same page? Is everyone reading from the same script? What is the content that we're putting out? How consistent can it be? How are we going to tell our story? What's interesting to these places to make somebody else want to come here? Who's going to shoot this stuff? Who's going to capture this content? Where's the creativity coming from that? Where's the money coming from to do all of this? I mean, it's like when you walk down a main street, like there are like even you guys walking down through Columbia, there's so many moving pieces and so many people working so hard for you to feel the way you're feeling when you walk down that street.
That's such a good point.
The streetscape.
You don't think about it when you're in it. You're just taking in what it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into that.
You're taking in all the beautiful buildings. You're taking in the antique lighting and the streetscape. And then you're looking at like, wow, there's a record shop here. Wow, there's a bookstore here. Wow, there's a bicycle shop here. Wow, there's a family owned health food store here. Wow, there's a brewery here. There's a distillery. You're like, why is all this stuff here? Just
all the character. And it's all this rich character, and it's not an accident.
No.
Yeah.
No. I'm glad you had a chance to experience it.
Me too. It was great to meet you, brother.
Nice
Thanks for your time.
Too. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see you around. Hopefully get out on the bikes one day.
All right. Peace.
Cheers, brother. If you've listened to the show for a while, you've probably heard me talk about Foreign Rider. What I really appreciate is the philosophy behind the brand. And the attention to detail is honestly kind of insane. Personally, I've been wearing the Supima t-shirt all summer. It's made from super soft, California-grown Supima cotton, and it uses a technique called flat lock stitching throughout for comfort and durability. And it's knit, dyed, and sewn in their hometown of Toronto. At first glance, you might think it's just a t-shirt, but when you wear it, you realize how much thought went into getting something so simple exactly right. That level of intention comes from the founder. He's been in the apparel industry for decades now, and he's one of the most authentic riders I've ever met. He literally rides every single day, no matter the weather. I don't know about you, but that's the kind of person I want making the products that I wear, and the type of authenticity that I want to align with. So if you're looking for some casual apparel that's built with real purpose, not flashy, not over-designed, just incredibly well-made, check out Foreign Rider. I think you'll understand exactly what I mean the first time you put it on. My listeners can use code BYND at checkout for a special discount. That's code BYND at checkout at foreignrider.com.